it is very apt, very relevant, very important to have this webinar on core competency framework in professional social work practice, social work education. We have nationally we had 2 rounds of UGC review on social work education. We also had the UGC model curriculum, and recent policy document is our NEP 2020. I think all these reviews and documents highlighted and emphasized the core or the key competence areas in social work practice. Internationally, when we look at, as we have borrowed our social work curriculum from West, whether it is Eurocentric, one can say, or Anglo-Saxon curricular framework, which we have inherited in India, though we have started the social work curriculum, formal discipline or a practice as a professional practice way back in 1936, I think we have continuously deliberated on our core competency areas. And we are continuing to deliberate and debate on these aspects. So one can see, in addition to our Indian policy guidelines, internationally we also have different guidelines like International Association of Schools of Social Work and International Federation of Social Workers. They had several consultations around the globe in 2020. And in fact, one of the interesting articles I see which have based on these consultations, the article has come up in 2021 of social work curriculum. I think these international documents or our ISSW or IFSW and our national bodies, whether it is UGC or UGC model curriculum or NEP now, I think have been emphasizing and reminding us again and again that how to increase the core competency area or the skills of the education, the curriculum. And in this context, I think it is necessary for us to explore and examine probably in last 70, 80 years or almost like 80 years, 90 years, the social work profession has been there in India. I think it is important for us to see what we have gained and what we have lost in these so many years. And probably, immediately after independence, the kind of development paradigm we adopted, the state played very, very dominant role to provide social welfare services to the poor and the needy in the country. And despite that, I think there was huge scope for civil society organizations to volunteer to respond to the needs and problems of the people who are in their neighborhood or in their own vicinity. And so we had number of NGOs, number of volunteer organizations which came up. And I think until 90s, probably, NGO sector was the major player in the area of professional social work in terms of job opportunities. To an extent, government and probably the private sector, that is in industries, with a large number of our graduates entered into the voluntary sector. So, if you look at the larger framework of social welfare, social development in any society, probably it comes to our mind that the three important actors, that is the state, civil society, and the industry. And also, until 90s, probably the state played very dominant role, and the civil society had enough space to support or supplement or fill up the gaps of the state, and probably market had supplementary role, very minimum role. But with the change of our political economy in 1990s, with the kind of privatization and liberalization, I think whole equation of these three actors have changed. And the state, which played the dominant role, started withdrawing from its roles and responsibility on social welfare. And I told the market became more prominent, and NGO spaces started shrinking, and probably last 10 years or more than 5-7 years, probably with the CSR coming in prominence, where 2% of their net profit have to be spent on CSR activity by the industry, I think state has continued to withdraw, and I think probably even this civil society space also has been shrunk, and so the space for CSR or the private sector or industry has gone up like anything. So I think this transition, I think, is very important for us to keep it in mind when we are talking about the core competency framework for social work practice. So when I say the opportunities we gain and opportunity lost, if we look at when we started, I think probably there were no B school which was coming into the B school graduate was coming into the social work sector or the development sector. They went into the market, the for profit sector. To an extent, certain engineering graduates or probably other engineering graduates and other graduates, non-social work graduates, probably got into the development sector somewhere in 80s and 90s. But today you see in 90s or post-90s, I think a lot of space what we had, we have lost. Because now any B school you go, there is some or other course which is relevant or which is catering to the field of development, to the field of sustainable development or ecology or so and so forth. And so the space which used to be claimed that yes, this space is for trained social workers, now it is no more the trained social worker space, but I think many of these spaces are being occupied by these management graduates. That is, I have nothing against them. But as a social work educator and the practitioner, I see that it has opened up. The whole sector has opened up. And in that process, probably social work as a profession has lost its opportunities, and many other disciplines have got in and they have created their own spaces. Okay? Either it is any kind of B school you see, you will have courses, and any large CSR foundations or large NGOs, you will find the management graduates. And so where are the social work graduates? So from that point of view, I think it is very pertinent for us to discuss in this webinar about this core competency framework. And when it comes to core competency framework, I think two important things need to be looked at. One is, what are the practice tracks of social workers? Which means, what are the job opportunities or the career pathways? And second aspect is, what are the key responsibilities or job responsibilities in relation to their role? And within these two aspects, practice track and the key responsibility areas. Based on these two components, the knowledge, skill, and behavioral, or the skill, knowledge, skill, and attitude, or the perspective, competence, concept. In social work curriculum and social work education, we emphasize on this knowledge, skill, and perspective or attitude. And so I think when we are talking about these three important core foundation of our curriculum, I think we also have to keep in mind on what are the practice tracks or what are the changes taking place in practice tracks, and also the key responsibility areas of our graduates. As I said, we have been losing our opportunities, we have been losing our spaces, and also there are many other disciplines which are getting into our spaces now. So we have to revisit, we have to re-examine ourselves and probably pull up our socks to see that how do we fit in all or filling the requirement of the practice tracks, the responsibility of the demands which are there in the field, in the practice. Unfortunately, we have not been able to move in that pace the way the field is changing. We have six practice methods, okay, direct or indirect methods, what we call it in social work, working with individuals or working with groups, working with communities, which we call it as the sacrosanct practice methods, as the direct methods. And then we have another three methods which are called social welfare administration, social research or social work research, and advocacy and network, which are called as secondary practice methods. But you look at where are our graduates going in? I was just looking at the data of last year of my graduates. Where have they joined? I just immediately asked my secretary, can you show me the database? Where are our students immediately after passing out, after doing a master's in social work? Where are they? And I found most of the designations start with either project coordinator or field coordinator or manager. There are common terminologies or designations. Another set is fellows or trainees. Okay, large number of them have got this designation, either it is project coordinator, project manager, project associate, or the fellows. And large number of our graduates are going into the private sector, not to the NGO sector. Because as we know, the NGO space has been shrinking. And equally, probably if not more than private sector, probably equal amount or equal number of students are getting into the government sector. Like in Kerala, Kudumbasri is one of the prominent recruiters of our graduates, including our institute. Similarly, there are many government agencies, like either it is, we started with NRLF or NHR, National Rural Health Mission, or National Rural Livelihood Mission, or National Urban Livelihood Mission, and so on and so forth, National Skill Development Corporations, and Niti Aayog, all the departments which are pertaining to welfare and social security and development. I think there are many development graduates are being recruited, both social work as well as non-social work. Because with the changing of the time, even the government sector is changing, and so you will find the typical, Mr. Jayakumar will agree with me, that many of the government sector is moving from the typical administrative departments to corporatization of institutions. Okay, though it is the government body, it is being corporatized, and so bringing in professionalization of these bodies and these institutions. And so many professionals are being recruited instead of directly administrators, civil servants, which used to be there once upon a time. But today, for example, in Skill Development Corporation, now most of them are, except the top officials who are from civil service, most of the professionals who are either social work graduates or rural development management graduates or business administration graduates or engineers. So I think we have to see that how do we upgrade, how do we keep ourselves with the pace of the changing time. And probably we have to move on or move beyond the typical six methods, sacrosanct methods of sociology, what we call it, and can pertaining or relevant skills around these six methods. Just a month back, I was visiting Frankfurt University of Applied Sciences, and I was teaching there to the undergraduate students, and I was told that any social worker doesn't require to go for masters. 4 years of undergraduate is enough to get job in government, because the most of the social welfare services are provided by the government, whether it is municipality, most of the large municipality corporations. Okay, so they are recruited by the municipality authorities as social worker, whether it is for the children, homes or elderly, and so on and so forth. So they have to just complete 4 years of undergrad program and they get job. And they're equipped at that job of childcare institutions, managing childcare institutions, homes and hospitals, counseling centers. The moment you go for masters, that means you are moving towards academics. The moment you do masters, you are overqualified for the job. So they don't want to go for masters. Okay, the moment you go for masters, you are going for PhD. So we have to see that if we want to, I think that's what NEP is emphasizing on, having 4 years undergrad program, so that the students or the graduate, either it is 1 year or after 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, with the entry exit level or option, one should be eligible to get jobs, depending on whether certificate or diploma or whatever it is. Okay, so around the globe, if we look at, I think there are several kinds of changes which have been taking place in social work curriculum, social work competency, as the whole reality or the context has been changing and it is becoming more and more complex. Okay, and you must have heard about some of these practices or things called ecological practice or strength-based practice or social justice practice or critical social work or anti-oppressive social work. Okay, and all these practices are based on certain perspectives, certain theoretical perspectives. We might get into sectors, health, education, rural, urban, but when we look at very carefully, all this practice evolves from a particular perspectives. And today, I think around the world, there are some of these practices are there and evolving. Last week there was a NAPSI workshop, and they had the theme of this NAPSI workshops was the green social work. And so these things have been changing, and so one has to look at what are the changes taking place. And probably when we see deeper and deeper, we see that it emanates, the practice emanates from perspectives. Okay, and when we look at perspectives very, very carefully and deeply, we find that there is several layers of perspectives, or layers and layers. When we open the perspectives, we see the discourses. Based on the discourse, there is kind of a developing paradigm being fixed. Okay, and when we get into discourse, there is a history, there is a system, structure, sector, context, and so on and so forth, which contributes or adds on to the developing or designing the perspectives. And based on this perspective, different approaches we have got. Conventionally, we started with charity to what we talk today about right-based approach or capability approach or empowerment approach. Okay, but I think one of the recent discussion around the world around the core competency areas being talked about is multicultural social work practice. And this multicultural cultural social work practice tries to include culturally competent social worker with ecological system perspective, strength perspective, social justice perspective, critical and anti-oppressive perspective theories, and critical race theory and intersectionality perspectives. So, including of all these different perspectives, there is kind of multicultural social work practices being discussed about, and around all in this multicultural social work practice, perspectives are the foundation, and it emanates, or it germinates the whole knowledge, skills, and perspectives to inform or to guide the social worker in their practice. And so when we look at, there are, I would say, three sets of skills or competency areas. One is the basic skills, interpersonal skills, okay, about the self, about value systems. Okay, so there is certain skills about self, about interpersonal skills. It is important, which includes values, which includes principles, which emanates from our constitutions at the moment, which emanates from our human rights, which emanates from larger human democratic society. And based on that, we see that kind of professional skills required. Is one of them is epistemic skills, that is methodological skills, which requires research skills, which requires ontological mapping, which requires academic writing skills, which requires theorizing skills. This is set of epistemic skills. Then we have either sectoral or contextual intervention skills. We have a whole range of skills. I am not getting to reading out the whole lot of skills sets we have, but some of the skills which are pertaining to the practice, that is project management related. And when it comes to project management, right from need assessment to appraisal to monitoring and evaluation to reconceptualizing the project proposal. And along with that, it involves your documentation, report writing, and so on and so forth. Reporting in our campaign, in our impact assessment exercises, how do we use these tools and technologies? And then another set of skills are about organizational skills, organizing, providing leadership, organizational management, designing the organization, bringing in innovation, providing the leadership. And along with that, probably third component I will add it, that is about the communities, mobilizing the community. Okay, understanding the community, mobilizing the community. And broadly, I would say that in addition to the practice or the practice tracks, the one set of practice track that is direct practice, which involves direct intervention with the people, which are largely interpersonal issues, psychosocial issues, with individuals, groups, or communities. And second set of practice or the practice tracks, which I call it indirect practice, which involves research and evaluation, monitoring, evaluation, need assessment, and so on and so forth, providing leadership to the organizations or institutions. And third one is policy, advocacy, and networking. So when we have this kind of the context, it is important for us to pull up our socks, and probably we have to review ourselves, whatever we have been teaching, and probably we have to revisit and bring in some of these competencies within the framework of our practice, social work practice, which will be more relevant, which will be more competitive, and also which will be able to provide opportunities as per the aspirations and also the demanding environment where we are living. So it is a challenge for us, and I think probably NEP is putting an opportunity, or giving us an opportunity to review and rework on our competency framework, and probably rework on it, and improve our existing curricular and the competency framework what we have. And probably this is a good beginning of this webinar which has been organized here, and appreciate and congratulate Professor Sandhya and her team, and everyone who are participating in this webinar. Thank you.